Welcome to this episode of the Fish North Georgia podcast, and today we're going to talk about the fall transition, fishing from the heat of summer into the fall. Right now it's August 1st here in Georgia, and it is hot, 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 and it's tough right now, but we know that very soon these temperatures are going to start dropping, and so we're going to discuss today, techniques and methods to start catching these fall fish, things to get prepared for. I've got my buddy Ryan Sheffield in the house, and also Jonothan Farmer, who's a local angler with the A.B.A. Actually, you did pretty well in the A.B.A. this year. How'd you end up finishing that nationally?
Nationally, I'm sitting in third.
Third nationally. Okay, so he might know a thing or two about fishing. He's been on the show before, so you guys should know him. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, click that notification bell, and if you're listening to this on iTunes and Spotify, hey, we appreciate you guys too. So, as I just described, we'll start with you, Ryan. Right now, August 1st, we got highs in the 90s, the water's in the upper 80s. Let's kind of give a little brief overview of what's going on right now, and then we will transition into the fall.
Yeah, right now you got basically two concentrations of fish on all your lakes right now. You have fish that are dirt shallow, and then you have fish that are deep offshore. Not really too terribly much in between right now. Most everything is relating to either really, really shallow or really offshore, pertaining to the herring lakes, which we'll talk about herring lakes here, but we'll kind of do a general, whether you fish a herring lake or not, we'll talk generally, because the threadfin shad lakes, that the threadfin and the gizzard lakes, the predictability of what the fish are going to be doing here as soon as we leave August. And, I guess it's a good thing we're doing this podcast now, because you can kind of start turning your wheels, and get your mind going for, because by September, middle into September, you start having fish that are already starting to do their fall thing.
Yeah.
It's water temperatures would probably potentially still be up, but they're still going to do the same thing that they were going to do regardless. Mother Nature and the moons and the suns and the rotation of the earth has an effect on fish, and some of them listen to it more than others.
Yeah.
So
you've been primarily fishing Lanier here lately.
Yeah, I haven't really had a whole lot much time to really go anywhere else currently, but that'll be changing here before too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be moving around a lot more.
Now, Farmer, you've been fishing more Allatoona. Now, you've been fishing some Lanier with Ryan in his club, but you've been fishing Allatoona a good bit lately.
Mostly Allatoona is the only place I've had time to do.
All right, you seen the same thing, though, on Allatoona right now?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fish offshore, and there's a few fish shallow that you can catch, but the majority of those fish seem to be offshore.
Okay.
There's still a few local fish, but
right now we got a topwater bite going.
Mm-hmm.
At least on Lanier, we're calling fish up over brush or throwing a jerk bait, certain things. But right now, those deep fish are relating to brush.
Yep.
Same thing with Allatoona.
Same thing with Allatoona.
Do you guys in Allatoona drop as much brush as the Lanier guys do? Okay,
yes.
So I know that goes on a lot of the lakes right there. Both of you fished this past Saturday, so let's kind of give a brief, I know you can't give your secrets away, but a brief kind of general overview of Saturday, and then we can see how that's going to transition. So Saturday, north end of Lake Lanier, seeing that same pattern, fish over brush?
Yeah, for me, that was pretty much the primary pattern. Was we just made milk runs on brush piles.
Okay.
Over and over and over and over and over again. I think we hit one of them. I think we hit one 6 different times Saturday.
Just going and coming back, going and coming back.
And at the last 2 times we hit it, we didn't catch a fish, but the first 4 times we hit it, we pulled at least one off of it on Topwater.
And I'll get those coordinates later.
Yeah, you can have those coordinates later. I mean, I'm transparent. I'm a book, but you can read me. I don't have any secrets to hide really. So, I don't care. My job is to help you guys out, try to catch more fish, and be more successful. So,
but it's hard to fish another man's game anyway.
It is difficult. But the game that I was playing Saturday is a game that everyone else also likes to play. It's more of a physical game. It's a lot more physical, demanding then
arms are sore after a day like
yeah,
Saturday.
A lot of
It's
casts.
a lot of up, down, up, down. No, it's not necessarily a lot of casts. It's a lot of up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down.
Oh,
up, down,
okay,
up,
I
down,
got
up,
you.
down.
I got you.
You know, because I mean, with the implement and the use of forward-facing sonar and stuff, you know, you can pretty much decide whether or not you need to sometimes even make a cast.
I got you.
You know, so but Saturday was a little bit weird for me. The bite that I was on previously up that way, and let me back this up. So I run a club, and we break the lake up into 3 sections. We fish 9 tournaments on Lanier and 2 off lakes, and then our 2-day classic is on Lanier. But we break Lanier up into 3 sections, and this past weekend we were forced to fish what we call the north end. And the north end is, you know, as far up the Chattahoochee River as you want to go, and then you cannot go below the bridge at 53 at Gainesville Marina. Everything else above that way you can fish. So it really sections you off. You know, the prime topwater bite, you know, is, you know, obviously down the lake more.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you have to adapt, and it makes you a better angler. And you know, to finish, you know, for those of us in the top 10 in this club, you know, I know a lot of people that say, oh, well, it wouldn't be that difficult. No, this club is, if you don't bring your A game, you're not going to get it. You're going to be low in the point standings. You know, pretty much right now, it's those of us all in the top 10 are pretty much, we're stacked together with
It's a couple pounds
separating us.
Right.
You know, outside of the top 2, and the top 2 teams this year, they've just done an absolutely phenomenal job. You know, Scooter Legan, he's leading now. He fishes for Emmanuel College. Him and his partner Evan Frulaney. They fish together, and they're in first now. And then Harold Grizzle and Mikey O'Neill are in second. They've kind of ran away with it for the most part.
8 pounds ahead. 8 pounds ahead of third.
And we've only had 7 tournaments, and they have a whopping amount of weight. They all have over 120 pounds on the year already through 7 tournaments, which is ridiculous.
Right.
And you know, the rest of us are all stuck around 100 pounds through 7 tournaments. So, you know, I've had a hiccup or 2 this year. I know Jonathan and them, they had a hiccup once or twice already this year. If you don't bring your A game the way that the way this club's set up, you know, every single weekend, you're going to fall.
Right.
If you're not averaging 14, 15 pounds a tournament, you're going to be low in the.
Okay, I got you.
So yeah.
So you're on the north end though.
So we were on the north end, and I had something figured out. It was topwater, pretty much. I had 4 different topwater plugs that I was alternating from, and it's just your traditional thing of big plug, small plug, solid color, chrome colored.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the old adage on herring lakes is, you know, if it ain't chrome, leave it at home. Well, yeah, to a certain extent, but you know, we caught, you know, we caught 2. But we had our tournament this Saturday that we had 2.5 hours basically of darkness.
Because you started at 4 a.m.
We started at 4 a.m.
Right.
And so we threw a lot of black spinnerbait and big 10-inch worm and stuff, and got bites on all of it. We put 2 in the boat actually on black spinnerbait, but had multiple other bites. But by 6:30, 6:45, finally, you know, sunlight's starting to really get up a little bit to where the topwater action is really starting to kind of break, where they can really hone in on a topwater plug and eat it. And had already fished like 2 from 6:15ish till then, and didn't get a bite on those first 2. Rolled up to the 3rd one, made 3 casts, put 3 fish in the boat. Bam, we got a limit. You know, back to back to back. But that's just a game that you got to play. This time of year, you know, you roll up to the right place at the right time when they're wanting to feed. It's not that difficult.
Right.
These fish that I caught Saturday, using forward-facing sonar, looked out there, seen them out there set up over that brush pile the way that I wanted them to be. I threw my Berkeley cane walker over the top of them and twitched that thing, walked that thing for about 2 seconds, all 3 casts, and they come up straight up and come ate it. You know, and
is that what you expected to happen?
Well, that's what you want to have happen,
right?
You know, and certainly the quality of fish up on the north end, spotted bass wise, is, you know, there's some big spots on the north end of the lake, but they're not as abundant as they are on the south end of the lake.
Okay.
But there's, you know, may get crucified for that, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, facts are facts. It's much easier to roll up to a brush pile on the south end of the lake and take 20 brush piles, and you'll find a school of 4-pounders than it is up the lake trying to throw topwater.
Well, that's the whole purpose of sectioning the lake off,
Yeah.
is to make you have to fish different parts of
Yes.
the lake, different.
Yes,
You know,
it just makes you
styles.
a better, well-rounded angler. You know, so
Okay.
it makes you a whole lot better. But after this weekend, me and Jonathan both agree, though, you know, we got one more real summer tournament left. We got one at the end of August, and I think after this August one here, then in this month, I think we're going to be all right. We're done with it.
We're done with it.
let's start getting round up for some fall style fishing.
Exactly.
So, you know,
And, you know, I know you fish Allatoona a lot, so I kind of want, and I know you fished Lanier this past weekend with Ryan. I want to kind of cover Allatoona a little bit with you, so that way I'm covering 2 lakes here in North Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, on Allatoona, similar to what he's doing, are you guys going out? How are you approaching Lake Allatoona right now before we get into the fall?
Well, it's just like Lanier. I'm seeing a lot of fish out there over brush piles in that 25, 30-foot range out there on them long tapered points and humps and stuff like that. You can go out there with a topwater or some type of swim bait and get those fish to commit. But it seems like there are more fish out there than there are shallow as far as like Lanier's concerned.
Yeah. And now you can officially use herring as bait. They finally had just admitted that the blueback herring are in
Bluebacks
Allatoona.
are in Allatoona.
They're in Allatoona
and
and have been for a little bit.
yeah, well, to have the population they've got now of them, they've had to be in there for a while.
Right.
But you're starting to see the fish act more like Lanier, out there roaming, chasing bait, stationed up in ambushes positions where they can come straight up and go back down into the cover.
Do you approach it like he said, where you go, you're using sonar, your forward-facing sonar?
Mm-hmm.
Do you approach it the same way with a brush pile this time of year? You're throwing that top water first?
I throw a topwater first to see if I can call them out of it. Now, I may be a little different. I may waste too much time because you can go to a brush pile, throw topwater. If they don't react, a lot of guys will go, all right, they're not, pull the trolling motor and go on.
Mm-hmm.
I might try to throw something down in it to see if I can get one of them to bite, see how they react to it falling into the brush pile, to see what kind of bite they're on. Say, or like Saturday when we were fished Lanier, I'd throw over a brush pile. I only caught one fish all day on topwater. I could not get them to come up.
Mm-hmm.
But if I threw something and it went down, they nosed down on it, and I caught a couple fish doing that. But the majority of our fish on Saturday actually came shallow. A lot of people caught theirs deep out on humps and everything, but we caught all ours pretty much shallow.
Okay.
8 foot or less.
I didn't catch a fish set up. I didn't catch a fish set up Saturday that was shallower than, I would say, 17 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's interesting how a tournament works. You pretty much got all yours deep. Y'all got most of
We
yours
didn't catch
shallow.
one out of less than 8 foot of water.
Really? Okay. But it goes to what you said, though.
But see, the deal was with that was, you know, I was banking on the sun to eventually pop out, and the sun just didn't pop out till
We gave up on the offshore bite because the sun didn't pop out.
Yeah, and the sun is critical on herring lakes. It is very, very critical. If you don't think it is, then you're just fooling yourself.
Well, the sun brings herring up.
Yeah.
They like the sun. They like the algae bloom and all that the sun creates. The threadfin gizzards and all that don't like the sun. They go deep when the sun comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Knowing what he just said, and you're going, so I assume you agree with what he said.
Oh, yeah.
The fish over the brush piles or where you were fishing, would they have been more concentrating on threadfin as far as their primary bait?
So I had, I ran 15 brush piles over and over and over again Saturday. 2 of them that I had located, they were feeding exclusively on blueback herring. that was what was there. The other ones that they were feeding on, they were feeding on shad.
Okay.
And the only reason I know that is because I could look out there and on forward-facing sonar, and I could see, the way that the bait was positioned, the way and how the size of the ball of the bait was, and and you see these round balls that don't move, typically, not all the time, but typically that's thread fin.
Because the bluebacks are flying across the screen.
The blueback will be up there. That you'll look out there on a school of bluebacks, and there'll be a ball, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's shad," and then all of a sudden that ball turns into a big old straight line, and it goes, whoosh, and it just moves. And it moves lightning fast, and you're like, "Oh, never mind. That's not
the
shad.
blueback.
That's
Herring
bluebacks."
are always on the move.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they'll gang up for a few seconds, and they kind of like take a roll call, and then they move on again. I guess is the best way to describe it.
He was talking about hitting 15 brush piles. Every brush pile had a different bait around it. That goes back to what he said about carrying 4 topwaters.
That was where I was.
Four different styles. You got a smaller one that mimics your threadfin or your smaller herring. You've got a big one that mimics the big herring or the gizzard shad.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a walker and some type of popper. Four baits, and you can't call any of them up with any of them.
Gotcha.
Move it.
So that's why I was getting ready to ask you. Like, if you come up to a brush pile, you see the type of bait. Say it is shad. Do you downsize? That's where I was going to go. Do you downsize your bait, your topwater bait?
Yeah, so pretty much for me the past couple weeks, and it's kind of been it's kind of always been my rule of thumb every single year. I have 2 big style topwater plugs, whether it be like a Berkeley Cane Walker 125 or a Chrome Vixen from Reaction Innovations, or a Chrome 117 Gunfish, or something along those lines, 115 Gunfish, a Super Spook. I'll have big plugs like that, and then I'll have something like the Lucky Craft Gunfish 95.
And that's more for the shad.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing, a new small plug that I highly suggest for you guys listening in on this and watching this that you might want to consider picking up is Arc has a new line of baits that's just come out, and their new TS 105, I think is what it is. Mm-hmm. It looks like a Sammy, but it's that 105 or whatever's profile, I believe is what it is. So it's like around the 4-inch size. And I'm gonna tell you what, that bait's got some sharp, nasty hooks, and it's got a good looking profile to it, and it sides to side walks a little bit different than some of the other baits. So I highly, for $7.99, I highly suggest to get you one of them. They got some good looking colors, some good looking paint jobs on them. But I actually caught one on that Saturday.
Okay.
And but I pretty much it's 2 schools of thought: big plugs and little plugs. And then of course condition wise, if we don't got no chop, which Saturday we didn't hardly have a lick of freaking wind.
No.
It was miserable.
Yeah.
Not having any wind, and wind helps anything offshore. Everyone says wind shallow. Well, yeah, wind affects fish shallow, but it affects those fish offshore arguably more, in my opinion, with wind to help those fish. It just breaks up that pattern that's up on the surface, up close to the surface of what the bait is that you're using.
Helps break up the profile, so that when they come up, they think they're coming up to get a shad, and they can't change their mind.
Yeah.
Right before they get there.
Yeah, it's too late. They've already committed to it. But
that's a good point.
But that's just pretty much always been the rule of thumb. I'll use spitters and slick comb, and I'll use walkers like the Vixen. Super Spook Junior or Super Spook Juniors, Sammys when there's some chop to the water.
Mm-hmm. See, I like it's kind of like what he said, the spitters and everything. But there's one that I'll throw on, say Lanier or Allatoona, that is a big player in Florida. I like a Devil Horse when it's slick calm.
Okay.
Sit there and rip that thing, making it throw water, make them look up at it.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now, we're going to transition into the fall, but right now, is there a Thermocline set up on Lanier?
Yeah, there's a Thermocline on the north end of the lake. Down on the south end, it's not really set up too good.
And
we're going to talk about
too
that.
much.
Do what?
Water gets churned up on the south end too much.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that here as we get it, because we're running out of time on the south end. Time has become the enemy now. It is August 1st, and the Thermocline really ain't set up very well. You know, there's people catching fish on the south end of the lake, you know, down there in 60, 70, 80 feet of water. There ain't no Thermocline right now. And that Thermocline typically sets up around between the 40 to 50 foot range.
Mm-hmm.
And it just hasn't set up on the south end. And that's we'll get into that in the fall. It's going to make, we're running out of time.
Okay.
And it's going to make things difficult.
Okay.
And I'm going to explain a little bit of that because I've experienced it.
Yeah.
It's going to be
well,
hard.
That's the whole purpose of this podcast, of course, is to help people catch fish.
Yeah.
And giving them the information. So before we get into the fall, how long, currently, again, we've said it's August 1st, how long do you think the current patterns will play?
Through September.
Through September. So we're giving you guys about a 2-month head start into getting mentally prepared for the fall.
Yeah. But you need to, as we start talking about the fall, there's a lot of things that you need to take notes on with what you're looking at.
Okay.
Right now, and we'll get into that with the fall, talking about what kind of things you need to make mental notes of right now.
Okay. Well, let's just jump into that because that's the direction that this episode is going. What are some of the mental notes that we're making right now as we prepare for the fall? Either one of you guys can jump in on that.
I like to pay attention to what creek mouth, because a lot of the fish are out on your main lake right now.
Mm-hmm.
I pay attention, what is my closest big creek?
To where you're seeing fish currently.
Where I'm seeing fish currently.
Okay. That is I agree. That should be rule number one.
What is my closest big creek? Because the majority of fish, when you start losing daylight earlier, the temperatures start to drop. We know the lake's going to flip soon.
Mm-hmm.
The bait and everything have already started making their push back because the oxygen levels on the main lake are depleting. When that lake flips, everything's going to be back in fresh water where they can get the freshest water they can get. Not all the fish, but a majority of the fish are going to be back there with the bait.
So rule number one, find the closest major creek to where you're seeing the biggest concentration of fish right now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that should be rule number one for all of you. Wherever you find, if you find a brush pile or something, we'll just take Lanier and Allatoona, for example, Hartwell, all these herring lakes for right now. If you find a hump or something or a point that has a major brush pile that has an absorbent amount of fish on it and bait, you need to mark that and look where, 200 yards away may be a major creek arm. Not saying it's Bible, but the odds are in your favor that when it starts transitioning to the fall, those fish are going to move to that major creek, that closest creek arm. That's where they're going to move to.
And when they start moving, and we'll get into the conditions and all, but are they going to set up on the outside, like towards the mouth of that major creek, or are they just going to get into the creek?
A lot of them, it's spring backwards, pretty much, because your fish are going to move in the spring. The way I like to do it, pre-spawn and everything, I go as far back as I can and work my way out, and you'll run into the fish. All right, well, now that you've ran into them, now you can run that all over the lake. They're going to be in that same kind of area in each major creek. Well, in the fall, you just do it backwards. You start out on the main lake and work your way back. Mm-hmm. And when you run into them, you can run that pattern mostly over major creeks in that area close to deep water. Same way with, like, wintertime. They like to be close to deep water where they can move up, move down, feed, and go back down.
Okay. So generally, when does this start? Let me just change that question around to this question. What dictates that movement? What dictates? Is it the length of the days? Is it the temperature? Is it the thermocline? What dictates that first movement that first wave of fish to go from the main lake in the summertime to the mouth of a creek in the fall?
I say it's your first cold front.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about bass fishing is we can all have our own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not necessarily, what works for me may not work for you. I get along with the first, major cold snap kind of that we get. And we're not talking, a lot of people get cold snaps confused.
First time it drops down into 60 degrees at night.
Yeah. The first night when you look up and you see a low of 63 and a high of 80 that day, well, it's still going to get warm that day, but
water temperature,
surface temperature in the fall. The one thing that you can take from the spring and use it in the fall is surface temperature. Wherever in the spring, it's flipped. In the spring, the main lake area may be 55 degrees, but back there on some rock where the sun's been shining on all day long, it may be 60.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where the fish are going to congregate at, is around that area. It's flipped in the fall, where you've got areas where, and especially like on these shallow flats that are in the backs of these creeks and stuff, and these shallow pockets that are right off the main lake. Those are the areas where when you get those nights that get down to the low 60s, fish will go to them first thing in the morning. They will move in there at night, but they will be there holding over into the morning.
But as soon as the sun comes up and it starts to get warm again, you'll see them push out to the first or second drop into the creek.
Yeah.
Do they become a little more predictable after that first cold front?
They're predictable until the turnover starts happening.
And once the turnover
happens, all rules leave.
Okay.
Because they do. I've seen them do some crazy things. You're just like, what the hell are they doing? Why are they doing this today? But you look, and the lake's flipping.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this before we get into talking about the lake flipping. Are we talking largemouth and spotted bass right now, or are we talking predominantly spotted bass as far as this movement from deep water into the mouths of the creek?
Largemouth and spots. There are a lot of largemouth deep right now, suspended over. I mean, we caught a largemouth out of 30 feet the other day, went on Allatoona, that was literally suspended over nothing, just hanging out.
Okay.
And
now you think that's because of herring?
Could be because of herring, or it could be because the water temp's at 89 degrees on Allatoona.
So it's hot.
Yeah, Allatoona's hotter than Lanier right now.
It's a little more shallow. So I imagine it heats up quicker and cools off quicker. Would that be a good thing to say,
that Chestatee and Chattahoochee River really has a lot more effect on Lanier than it does.
You have a lot more
Etowah.
sediment.
Yeah.
In those two rivers that feed Allatoona than you do
the ones in there. Okay.
The Chestatee River and the Chattahoochee River are very ancient rivers. They are predominantly rock.
You have a lot of sediment coming down in
Etowah is a big, there's a lot of mud. And if it rains, it gets muddy.
Well, I mean, you'll take the Chestatee, for example, just the Chestatee side. It may come a golly washer, but that don't necessarily mean that the Chestatee is going to turn to mud.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes over here and it rains, we over here not far from the Etowah River over here at Fish, North Georgia. If it comes a golly washer for 15 minutes,
it's orange.
It's orange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Chestatee, just for example, does not do that.
Well,
you need an extended period of rain to make the Chestatee turn muddy.
Okay.
You've also got the Etowah going through a big town, we'll say, Canton. It goes right through the heart of Canton.
Yeah.
So all that runoff and everything dumps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right into the river.
Yeah.
So that muddies it up. Plus, it is a muddy river, and because it is such a muddy river, you got all that sediment. Allatoona heats up quicker.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Muddy water will heat up quicker than clear water.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard that before.
It will heat up and cool off quicker.
Okay.
Just because it holds heat and cold.
Yeah.
Far superior than clear water does.
Okay. Let's talk about the Thermocline because it's been brought up several times already. You said one is set up on the north end of Lanier, not so much on the south end of Lanier. Farmer, are you seeing one on Allatoona at all?
I'm starting to see one up in the creeks on Allatoona set up, and usually the ones in the creeks set up anywhere 15 to 20 foot.
Okay.
Main Lake, I haven't really seen it. There's been a lot of boat traffic on Allatoona this year.
According to the Corps, it's the most popular lake in Georgia now. Seriously, more than Lanier. Lanier has always had that title, but here recently, Allatoona, according to them, according to the Corps, it's the most visited lake in Georgia now.
I still see more boats on Lanier than I ever see on Allatoona.
Yeah, I'm just going by what they say.
Well, it's because everybody. I don't know how many posts I've seen here lately about Lanier still being haunted, and
I'm going to do a podcast on that.
I went on a rant
on
somebody's post telling us like it's not haunted. It's just, and I don't wish to speak ill of the dead, but that lake's not haunted. 99% of those accidents that happen on Lanier are
self-inflicted.
I agree.
Or avoidable.
I think, though, wouldn't that be a good... Let's do a podcast on that. We're going to do a podcast on the history of Lake Lanier. We'll cover Oscarville, everything.
How many times a week are you on Lanier?
I'm on
at least one at a minimum.
I'm on it once every 2 weeks, or 2 or 3 times every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you've never heard...
I've swam in Lake Lanier. I've never had dead bodies swim up and grab a hold of my legs and jerk me down the abyss.
The haunting on Lanier can be termed in another word, the stupidity on Lanier. The inexperience on Lanier. The people thinking, hey, I've had 6 beers. It's a good idea to swim out to that island that's 150 yards
that
out.
Island looks,
but I haven't swam
than what it is.
That's a whole nother podcast. And we're going to do one on that. I think that would be interesting to do. When does the Thermocline normally? Actually, let's do this. Explain what a Thermocline is for somebody listening that doesn't know what a Thermocline is. And you don't have to get technical. The layman's terms.
You want me to do it or?
Either one. I don't care.
The thermocline is the dense part of the water that is not oxygenated. Below the thermocline, there is hardly any to none oxygen. That's why you see a lot of bait set up above it.
Okay, so it's the level of water to where...
It's like the floor, basically.
Between a first floor and a basement?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the basement would have no oxygen.
Right.
Above it has oxygen, but it flips at some point.
Yes.
And what causes the flip?
The flipping starts when you have a consecutive spree of nights where you have water temperatures that stay air temperatures, that stay well below the surface temperature of the lake. And that coolness and 1 or 2 days don't do it. You need a couple of weeks straight of it happening to where, if you got we'll use Allatoona right now. Farmer said it's 89. If we get a stretch here in like September or October where we got 3 weeks straight of temperatures in the low 60s every single night, you will start to see the flip will start to occur
because that surface temperature is going to cool.
Cold air is dense, and cold air pushes the water, and it basically destratifies on the surface.
Yeah, cold water is denser than warm water. Once the surface temp reaches colder than what's below it at the thermocline, it's what they call the flip.
So that water sinks.
Sinks, and the warmer water comes to the surface, which brings all that unoxygenated water to the surface.
Yeah.
And that's when you start seeing air bubbles all over the place.
Yes.
You start seeing leaves and pine needles that look like they should have been sunk for months. Black, old, nasty looking leaves. The lake's flipped.
That has been pushed up from the surface.
And water temperature and water clarity
is gone.
Now, how long does it take for that to settle up?
Depends upon how cold it gets. The longest one that I've ever experienced on Lanier is it took a month.
It's usually once it flips, 2-3 weeks, and it's gone.
On a normal
cycle.
On a normal cycle.
About 7 years ago, we had, and it just so happens that it coincides roughly with when the lake. It was year number 2 of Lanier staying high all year long. Never hardly got below full pool. We had cold. As all of a sudden it got cold. You know, we had a hurricane come, and behind that hurricane was some cool air. You know, obviously with hurricanes, that's what happens. You know, that's what, you know, for those of you who don't know, that's kind of what gives hurricanes fuel. You know, there's cool air that pushes that hurricane. That's their gas that makes them go. And if you don't believe me, go look at temperatures down in South America on the coast and stuff. When a hurricane forms out there in the coast and comes up, after it leaves, the temperatures drop 10, 12 degrees.
So you said after the hurricane
after
goes
the
through.
hurricane moves. But that year, about 7-8 years ago, roughly, it took over a month to do it because it happened. That hurricane came through in September. And right behind it, all of a sudden we had days in the 70s.
I think I remember that hurricane anyway.
You probably remember that. We had days in the 70s, and all of a sudden the freaking lake just turns brown. Well, when that hurricane came, basically what happened was the water temperature, the surface temperature, just spiked about 8 degrees low than what it was. It was insane. You know, we're literally the weekend before, we're literally fishing an 85-degree water temperature, and then the next weekend we're fishing at 76. It was insane. And so that started happening. What started to de-stratify really, really quickly. Well, the hurricane leaves, the cold air leaves, and then all of a sudden, weatherman comes on, and he says, we got another hot spell coming in. It gets back up into the 90s. And now all that did was just prolong everything. And when it gets back up hot again, when it starts to de-stratify, it is just not the right combo. Because when things start de-stratifying, and we're talking this in terms of the fall bite, the fall transition, when a lake starts to de-stratify and flip, you have certain pockets throughout the lake where there's more oxygen particles parts per million, and wherever those are, you will find concentrations of fish and bait. Well, when it gets hot again, all of a sudden, it doesn't take a chemistry degree to figure this out, but colder water holds oxygen better. Mm-hmm. Well, the surface temperatures and stuff started to heat back up again because we had consecutive days again in the 90s. And that just made life miserable. But I remember fishing that, and we were catching everything. Let me back up. What little we were catching was in about 15 foot of water. But we would go out to brush piles, and it was just like, there ain't a damn thing here. Mm-hmm. There's nothing out here anymore. All of a sudden, they were there, and now they're gone. Well, these fish were out there. They were out there in the middle of the freaking lake, in the mouths of these creeks, out there suspended over 80 foot of water and 15 feet of water. Because that was where the bait was, too.
The money shot, as Henry Cowan likes to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the reverse of that's a bad situation that we had going. But what was it, 3 years ago when it was such a mild winter? The lake never flipped.
It never flips, no. And there's people that'll argue that it did flip, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I've experienced many turnovers, and I fished through them. It
flipped, but it was like a weak flip. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But that's why people were catching fish on Topwater up until December.
Yeah.
Okay.
Out there offshore, because the fish never had to push. They never had to make that push. Yeah. There was still fish back here because of the shorter days and the temperatures. But the fish out there on the main lake that would have had to make a push to a little pocket or something to feed because the bait was there on a bad turnover, Didn't have to.
Okay.
We were throwing magic swimmers on the main lake in January 1st and catching fish.
And everybody talks about that year when they go.
Oh, it was awesome that year.
Talking about Topwater.
It was so much fun. You go find a school of fish that was busting on herring or threadfin, and you throw in there when they come up schooling. When they would come up schooling, they would just come up and they would just stay up. Mm-hmm. And but we were catching. You would throw in there, you'd catch a spot. You'd throw in there, you'd catch another spot. You'd throw in there again, and you'd catch a striper. You'd throw in there again, you'd catch a a spot. You'd catch a largemouth. It was unreal. And that happened, and that stayed, all the way up until about February.
And then it
finally got cold in February, and it really kind of screwed our spring up pretty hard.
But but somebody that's preparing for the fall right now can kind of watch that weather, and if we don't get that cold snap, then basically your patterns that are holding true now will still hold true in November, December, if it stays mild.
Yeah.
And we don't get that big cold snap that you're talking about.
Well, it's not even that big of a cold snap. It's just a week of consecutive where it dips down into the 60s. You might have a night dip down into the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Once it starts dipping back down into the fall weather, that's when you're going to start seeing a lot of your fish move from the offshore stuff back to the bank, moving back in your major creeks.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, again, in our mind, we're preparing for the fall. For somebody that hasn't fished the fall that much, what are the techniques that we're going to start using? Right now we're throwing topwater over brush piles deep. And, of course, there are some fish. Some fish stay shallow year-round.
That's your residence.
We're not going to talk about shallow fish.
We're talking about these fish out on the main that are moving in. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to be doing? We've located them. Let's say this. We've located them in a mouth. We've had that cool down or that cold front. They've moved to the mouth. How are we targeting those fish?
First thing in the morning, I'm going to the bank with a buzzbait.
So you're going shallow because in your mind they've moved up, they're feeding shallow, and then they'll move back?
The bait are up there feeding on what happens in the summer, the algae bloom. That's what shad are up there doing on the bank. They're wherever the wind. I will look at it this way. Whatever the way the wind blew that night, that's the bank I'm fishing first thing in the morning because that's where the bait's going to be, where the algae are. I'm going to hit it with a buzz bait or a small crankbait.
Okay. What about you, Rod?
Yeah, for the fall, for me, buzzbaits reign supreme for me. I could just cover so much water. And I've got a loud profile that's a bait imitator that also, too, kind of eliminates small fish. Mm-hmm. You don't catch very many small fish on buzzbaits. I'm trying to find some big fish to eat. The other thing about it, too, is with spotted bass, not so much with largemouth, but with spotted bass, they wolf pack in the fall. And what a wolf pack is a group of about 5 or 6 fish that are big. They're not,
They're
little.
looking to corral a ball of bait and keep it there.
3+ pound spots that are looking
working as a team.
Working as a team. And if you run across them, you'll get one to bite quick, and
but you'll pull the school.
You'll pull the school with you. So that's why in October and stuff you're like, oh my God, look, there's more with it. It's because it's they're wolf packing together. So they're all working in one mind and one accord. They're looking to eat.
Okay, so are the fish feeding heavily to get ready for the winter, or are they just feeding because it's
they're looking to pack on some weight to be able to save calories for the winter.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so first thing in the morning, both of you guys are targeting shallow fish. Now, are you targeting those fish on the banks at the mouth, or are you didn't you say you started at the mouth of the creek and you worked all the way to the back?
Yeah.
Same with you?
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting at the mouth of a creek, you're hitting the windy bank or the night before or whatever the wind's blowing that morning. You're targeting that, and how far back will you run?
As far back as I can go to see where the bait's at.
As long as they're biting.
As long as if I'm going in, say we're into October, right there towards the end of the fall, I'm going to be looking for most of my bait to be back in the last 3/4 of the creek. But I'm not going to leave out the other section of the creek. I might idle through and look with my side scan to see where the bait's at. Mm-hmm. But I know majority of the bait's going to be back towards the back.
So why are you guys, you're still throwing topwater, so why are you switching to a buzz bait as opposed to all these other baits that you've been throwing during the summer?
Because you cover water, one, but the other thing too, compared to the topwater plug, I can bang a buzzbait off the bank into the water.
I can run a buzzbait through logs and not have to worry about my treble hook getting caught.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you fish down one of my favorite things, one of my number one targets for late September through October is riprap. Riprap that's in the mouth of a creek, going into the mouth of a creek. Those are some of the big fish holding places that you'll find, and you'll find major populations of fish in those areas. With a buzzbait, you gotta throw it on the bank, like literally throw it on the bank. You can't if you come 2 foot short of the bank, the odds of getting bit is not very good. You got to throw buzzbait to the bank, and as soon as it hits close to the bank, you almost want to bounce it off a riprap and let it and then into the water right there beside it, and it'll and then within 2 turns of the reel, if there's one up there, if you run it in front of one, they'll eat it that quick.
Now, what is it about the riprap that's attracting those fish?
I think it's like what Farmer talks about with the wind, and I agree with that too on that. And on riprap, when the algae gets blown up against that riprap, it kind of creates a wall that it kind of has to hang around. Well, it gets shoved up against that rock. And then also too, all summer long on the riprap, algae grows all summer long along the riprap. So they just have it's just a zooplankton algae rainforest basically
right.
for the shad.
That's why you see always when you go to a riprap bank during the summer, you see bluegill bait everywhere. It's the same thing with like a dam. You go up against the dam and you see tons of bait fish, threadfin, herring. They're all over a dam. Well, that dam is a wall where all that algae just slams up against, and it's concentrated.
So would you say for someone who's trying to get into that, getting better at the fall fishing, that's the first thing you would look for in the mouth of a creek is some riprap or something that would hold algae?
I would look for the hardest bottom I could see on the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be riprap. If it's boulder rock.
It can be big old boulder rock, yeah.
Then that's where I'm looking.
Just some type of structure that's hard and that algae.
I mean, Allatoona has a crap ton of it.
Mm-hmm.
Allatoona,
the whole damn lake is rock.
The whole lake is rock. But just a popular creek that we'll take for example in Allatoona. As soon as you pull into Illinois Creek, what do you have on both sides of Illinois Creek? Regardless what direction in Illinois Creek the wind blows, it's rock cliffs. It's rock. It's hard rock and. Illinois Creek, getting to know some of these other Allatoona guys. I know a lot of guys catch them in Illinois Creek. Y'all crucify me if y'all want to, giving away y'all's places. But
I think it's pretty well known.
Illinois Creek is one of the biggest community holes on that lake.
But that seems to be like that one, for example, seems to be one that, if I had never fished Allatoona and say I had a 2-day tournament in October and I saw Illinois Creek, I would be spending some time heavily in there on practice. Okay.
What's an alternative to the buzzbait if somebody's not confident in throwing a buzzbait?
Square bill.
You like a square bill. Okay.
A 1.5 square bill.
Okay.
Because in the fall,
think
small.
In the fall, think small.
Yeah.
Well, all your bait or all your fish have spawned in the spring this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of these little all these little fish are about
an inch,
about a knuckle, about a knuckle length in size. Well, now all these fish are feeding on those because they're easy pickings.
Okay.
They don't have to chase down a 6-inch herring. They can come up and gulp and get a mouthful of
smaller ones,
small stuff.
Okay, in the fall, think small. That's good. What about you, Ryan? He's going with a square bill. What are you going with as an alternative to the buzzbait in the fall?
I got 2 trains of thought on it. If I've got some wind, I'm going to pretty much throw nothing but a spinnerbait. If I don't have much wind, I'm going to throw, if I can't get bit on a buzzbait, I'm going to throw a popper.
Okay. Now, you like the spinnerbait. What about you, though, with a spinnerbait? Do you use that in the fall?
I love a spinnerbait, like a mini-me. I like a mini-me in the fall. I also like
because you can burn it,
and I also like, if I've got stained water, I like a chatterbait, either a white one or a white and chartreuse.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you're throwing that chatterbait in that situation, Are you burning it? You hopping it like a jig? How are you working that chatterbait?
Like he said with the buzzbait, you're trying to get as close to the bank as you possibly can. If you're fishing with a partner, it's hard to do if you've got somebody in the boat with you. But if you're by yourself, like with the A.B.A, you get to fish by yourself.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to put my boat as close to the bank as I can and parallel it.
Okay, that was where I was going to go with that.
And I'm not burning. I'm not doing, but I'm throwing pauses into my cadence. I sit there 4 or 5 turns, pause it. 3 turns, pause it. Pop my rod. Give it something different to make those fish react to it.
Almost a reaction style bite.
Yeah.
Okay. Ryan, as far as like the spinnerbait, are you paralleling the bank any, or are you throwing to the bank and bringing it out and hoping for that strike in the first 5-6 feet?
Yeah, I pretty much parallel a lot. When I'm not paralleling, I'll 45.
But you're definitely not 90 degree.
No. If you 90 degree with a spinnerbait or a buzz bait or something, for the most part, unless the fish are dead on the bank, you pretty much you're counting yourself out,
wasting time
for 7/8 of your cast.
45 in the bank for me in the fall. What I'm doing when I 45 it, I'm in search mode. I'm looking to see where those fish are at.
Yeah, now both of you guys I consider power guys because you guys are running your trolling motors pretty quick. I know 6
or 7.
Yeah,
Mine doesn't go below that.
Same thing, Ryan. You guys like to move quick. So this is not a let's work this rock. You guys are moving.
Yeah,
you're hitting and moving.
In the fall, and it does a lot of times of the year, spring, winter, summer, you can slow down and not cover as much water because the fish will bunch up in an area. But in the fall, they're so scattered because of the lake turning over or because of weather situation or what the bait's doing. They're so scattered, you have to cover water.
Okay.
I mean, if you pull up on a laydown, yeah, there might be 5-6 fish in it. But like he said, they're wolf packed. You pull that one out, now you've pulled 3 of them out there with you.
And generally, once you've pulled the school,
they're gone.
You might as well leave that spot alone for a while.
They know you're there. You can come back to it at a later time, but
you can come back to it about an hour or 30, 45 minutes later and try to get them again. But
yeah.
Now, with this technique of going down the bank, paralleling the bank, 45s, or running it, exclusively right on the bank, how much does forward-facing sonar come into play with this type of fishing?
Mine stays off.
So you guys are not using this?
Don't need to use it.
Once you're in that shallow water, you don't need it.
Do you think in shallow water the ping of the sonars affects the fish?
I'm sure it does. You can see it now. They're starting to get used to it. The ping of a forward-facing sonar.
You can pull up to a brush pile. There was one pile that we had already fished a couple of times this past Saturday, and some other people must have fished it in between us. And being limited with 19 boats, I'm sure I wasn't the only one. I'm about bet every dollar I got I wasn't the only one. And I rolled up to one, drop trolling motor, looked out there, and here they come. Immediately. They just came right off the brush and just came straight to the boat. And they're like, oh, look, another boat.
So you think the sonar made them do that?
I think so. Yeah.
Made them come to the boat?
I think so.
It'll if you've ever had your 2D or 2D on at the same time you've had the forward facing on, you can see them from 60, 50 feet. And they were moving side to side, and as soon as you put it on them, now they stay there, and they come 20, 30, or 30, 20, 10.
Do you think that's because they're equating the sonar with bait? Do you think that they hear that ping, 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 and the last time I did that, something got thrown across me and I ate? I mean, is it conditioning or what?
I think conditioning has a lot to do with what's going on now in the fishing community. Especially with we're all running graphs that are more powerful than they've ever been before. Mm-hmm. Not even talking about forward facing sonar. I mean, a lot of people have forward facing sonar, but we're running graphs that have they're taking the amp draw that we've got to use to get them to function properly is just insane. What used to suffice in 2007 and 2008 does not work anymore power-wise.
Out of date.
It's out of date.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, 455, 455 gigahertz is you don't realize how big of a broad spectrum that is, but that is a powerful, 455 is arguably the best range to use for side scan.
Oh yeah,
it comes up with more detail. It looks out farther.
455 gives you a broad picture.
Yes.
To find stuff.
Yes.
But once you find it, say you mark it on your side scan, flip your boat around, throw it around the 800, you go back over it, you get more detail with the 800 directly under the boat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think they're so used to it now. But, boat traffic nowadays, is far more than it ever has been. Every single year we got more and more and more boats on the lake. Not just striper fishermen, bass fishermen, crappie fishermen, pleasure boaters.
Yeah.
And I think on Lanier and Allatoona, I think the fish are used to boat traffic, and they're used to sonar, but the amount of pounding that they take from sonar, I think, gets them,
conditions them.
Conditions them. I think it's kind of like if you live near a fire station, like a fire station. When you first hear it, you hear the sirens going off all the time when they're leaving. Well, you're like, something happened. And then you run to the window and you're looking. You're like, oh, where are they going? And they're going up the road. They're going down the road. Whatever it is. And then after a while, though, of that, you kind of just acknowledge the fact that, there goes a fire truck.
Yeah.
Or there goes an ambulance. You just kind of
you don't even
think about it anymore.
You don't even hear it anymore.
It's like moving next to a gun club.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a gun club in my backyard.
You live next to a gun club.
Yeah, the first couple of months you're there, it's like, wow. But after about 20 years, the only time I ever even notice it's there is if somebody fires off something that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
A little bigger.
Something goes really fast, I'm like, oh, that sounds different.
So I think in terms of sonar, I think the fish have gotten conditioned to it to the point of they just acknowledge the fact that it's there and they react to it the way that they want to react.
Okay.
And plus with school mentality, if one of them comes to the boat, then the rest of them are like,
they don't want to get left out.
Where's Ed going? And they follow Ed to go see where Ed's going,
All right.
Well, you've got my thought on the schooling mentality. All right, you've got a fish that's hit a lure, right, and he's fighting. Looks like to a fish, it looks like he's chasing bait all over the place.
While he's fighting,
so
he's caught up.
They come with him, looking.
Yes, and that's how you get those doubles, and everybody talks about.
Well, that's how, like right now, I had it happen to me Saturday, and I couldn't believe it's already gotten to this point because it's usually later in the year. You hang one, and it happens to the best of us, it pulls off. Don't immediately start reeling it in. Let it float back down. Just kind of hang it there. And Dane and me picked one up when we lost one, and we just let it sit there and kind of sink back down. Another one picked it up.
Because there's something there with it.
Yeah, because there's some there with it, and it's school mentality.
Okay.
Oh, he hit it, killed it. Here I come.
I'm going to clean up the mess. Get his thing. All right, so we both of you guys have covered, going in with the buzzbait, spinnerbait, square bill. Now we're getting a little bit more into the fall. How are we going to transition into those fish before they move into the ditch? So, there's got to be a period of time before your wintertime ditch fishing sets up. Those fish are doing something a little bit different, or are you just targeting them with buzzbaits and square bills until such time as they go in the ditch?
Well, when I move away,
I want to hear your answer first before I give mine.
All right.
When I move away from the buzzbait, and I'll stay on the buzzbait bite and almost up all the way in to the end of October, beginning of November.
Okay.
Because the fish are going to be there just feeding up, depending on the weather. When I move away from the buzzbait and the square bill is when the sun gets high. When the sun gets high and it moves the thread fin and everything back offshore, that's when I'll start going to a hair jig. A hair jig's big in the fall. I like a fluke, anything bait oriented, and I'll always have a jig tied on in the fall too.
Okay. So you're gonna let that sun dictate when you put the buzzbait up.
Now in the herring, it's not as big a deal because a lot of herring will still stay out towards the main lake because they like the higher water column and everything like that. But your thread fins, your gizzards, your spot tails, when they start moving in and it's early in the morning, low light and everything, they're up towards the surface. They're almost on the bank. They're up on the surface just doing their thing. When the sun comes up, it sends them deep.
Okay.
So you follow the bait to find the fish in the fall.
Because those fish are going to move deep with them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you heard his answer. Ryan, what's yours?
So I pretty much have this thing that I've come up with on my own that I call it, and I call it the in-between.
The in-between?
Yeah. So this is like, depending upon weather, this is like November through 1st of December when it's really not winter. We have this period where when the water temperature gets back down to the 60s, where we have that's what I'm talking the in-between. We will have fish that will run bait into the backs of these pockets, into the backs of these creeks, and they'll be dirt shallow. And basically, when you find the right one, you'll know you found the right one because they'll have bait corralled, and then they'll basically form a wall straight down the middle of the pocket from the bank to the bank. The bass, the striper, they all form this wall, and they won't let the bait leave the back of the pocket, and they will feed and feed and feed and feed and feed.
Just
and
gorging
there's
themselves.
no telling how many fish you can catch out of it. So that's what I like to call the in-between period, and I pretty much throw nothing but jerk baits, A-rigs, swim baits, Kitech swim baits, and I don't really throw much of anything else. And I sit in those areas and just stay there.
Well, you can catch
all
30, 40
day
fish
long
out of that one hole because they keep reloading in there.
But there's
Okay,
one
yeah.
main factor that dictates every single one of these, and I want everybody to really listen to this. And if you get anything out of this, pay attention to this the most. The main factor with all these places is water runoff. You've got some form of a creek coming in the back. You have, after a major rain, you have a waterfall in the back of this pocket. You know, that water that's coming in is considerably cooler. And what did we say earlier? Cooler water is more oxygenated. So it's essentially the best way to describe it, I guess, is like flipping the AC on and standing beside a window unit. You know, there's nothing, you know, I know a lot of people got, you know, central AC, but there's still something about standing right beside a window AC unit in the summertime.
Oh, yeah.
And just standing by one of them jokers. You know, it's a different kind of cool. Well, it's the same kind of thing. You have this fresh water that's come straight from the sky, that's cooler, that's higher, that's got a lot of oxygen in it. And the bass and the bait know, and the bass know where those areas are, you know. And fish are stupid, you know. I always say they swim, they feed, they spawn, and they react to their environment. That's pretty much all that they do. They don't really do much anything else. And that part is reacting to their environment, where a creek or a waterfall goes in. Where after a rain, you know, if I have a tournament, you know, in the Friday night or Saturday night before the tournament, whatever it is, if it comes a rain in October or November, I'm loving it because I know exactly where I'm going to probably go. I'm going to forego a couple of things
just to get to that spot.
To go to that place because of the hopes of this is happening. And I've had it happen many a times where roll into that place, make 5 casts, catch 5 fish, and you have a limit already. You know, and not no 10 pounds neither, you know, 12, 13, 14 pounds. Then you can go big fish hunt the rest of the day and try to upgrade your bag with 1 or 2 fish and try to bump yourself up there to those higher teen weights on these lakes. And the Allatoona guys, for all you guys that might fish Allatoona, you listen up on this too, is now that herring are really, really establishing themselves in Allatoona, you're going to notice that those little areas that the shad have always gone into where they have a waterfall are about to blow up. And you're going to catch striper, and you're going to catch spots, and you're going to catch the biggest spots that are swimming around Allatoona on these areas where waterfalls and freshwater creeks run into the backs of these pockets.
Yeah.
But it's just a feeding frenzy.
Yeah, Allatoona's going to change a lot over the next few years.
It already has started to change.
It's starting to change now.
You're starting to see some of the bigger fish caught out of that lake. This year alone, there's been some giants.
Well, you fish those Tuesday nighters out of Gatewood, every other week or however often it is you do it. How many times have y'all seen fish over 6 pounds weighed in this summer?
There's been a few, and
y'all have had a handful of 4.5 pound spots weighed in too. Not just these F1s that they're stocking in Allatoona.
Yeah,
but these Coosa spots that are coming out of the Etowah. With the herring getting really dominant now in Allatoona, you're going to have a lot of fish swim out of the river to come live in the lake.
Well, that is bringing up the river. That is one area I haven't mentioned. I'm a river rat in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I love current in the fall.
And is that because the current brings that oxygenated water? Same thing, or just cooler?
The river is always cooler. The river is always more oxygenated because the water is always turbulent. And the fish position themselves in so many predictable areas.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to predict where
I'd
those
love to go
fish
fish one of them. Why come we don't go fish those things every once in a while? I know we're not Allatoona boys.
What?
The Tuesday nighters?
The Tuesday nighters.
You got to get in.
It's one of those. You got to know somebody, right?
Yeah.
Heck with you guys.
But
no,
I'm a big river rat in the fall, just because I can go up in the river and say there's a laydown that comes down. A lot of people make the mistake of they'll let their boat drift with the river and go down, point that nose in the current, and go up. Because when you throw your bait's coming down with the current naturally. Mm-hmm. If it's pulling against the current, it don't look natural.
Are you still doing that 45 thing that you're doing in these creeks?
45ing, but mostly, like I said, the fish are more predictable. I'm looking for current breaks, a big rock.
Almost like you're trout fishing, kind of.
If
there's a point in the river, a rocky point in the river,
a big channel swing or something like that,
and you throw something across it,
there's something there.
There's something there.
The same thing with a laydown. A laydown's a current break too. They'll sit right behind that log, wait for something to go underneath it or over it, right in their face.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And fish by nature are lazy,
mm-hmm.
So if they can get an easy meal, they're going to take advantage of an easy meal.
I understand. You brought up, and I was going to go there. We've talked buzzbait, square bills, and all that, but you started bringing up the Kitex, the swim baits. Big baits on both lakes. You really can use them year round. But what is it about the fall, and what size Kitech are you using? What are we still thinking small? Are we using the 2/8s, or are we going
3/3?
2/8s, 3/3s, because in the spring we throw some of the bigger Kitechs. We downsizing in the fall?
I start with a bigger one. I don't know what you do, but I start with like a 3/8, 3/3, and then by the time winter rolls around, I'm pretty much down to a 2.8.
Okay.
3/3, 2.8 basically. I hope to get bit. I hope to get bit on a 3.8, because if I get bit on a 3.8 size Kitech, it's no doubter.
Mm-hmm. A little more quality.
It's not a. I hope it keeps. It's typically, if I can get bit on a 3.8, it's a better fish.
Okay.
But by the time we get to like what he said, when it's fall, think small, and that rule, kind of general rule of thumb, is the way it is. The thing about the fall compared to the winter is the fall, sometimes if you do something that will stand out, sometimes you can give yourself an edge in terms of boating fish.
Okay.
I do kind of the same thing he was talking about, a bigger Kitech, a 3/8, a 4.2, or a 4.3. It's 4.3, I think.
Yeah. 4.3, 3.8, 3.3,
Yeah.
2.8. Yeah.
I will actually kind of do the same thing I do with topwaters. I'll have 2 or 3 different Kitex laid out on the deck. I have a 2.8, a 3.3, or a 3.8, and a 4.3. Somewhere in that range. I'll start big, throwing around stuff to see what I can find. If they eat it, if they don't, then I'll move to the next one. Roll it down the middle of the creek or off the sides, don't get a bit, and then I'll go down to my small ones. See what they want. You're also got your head on a swivel looking around to see what, if they're blowing up, to see what bait they're popping out of the water. Are they popping out stuff the size of your fingernail, or are they popping stuff out that's the size of your 6 to 7 inches long?
Mm-hmm.
You're always trying to match the hatch.
Right.
So if they're feeding on inch bait, you're gonna have to go down to a little crappie jig or something like that to see if you can get them to bite. But if they're eating on herring that are 6, 7 inches long,
You're throwing that big one. Yeah.
I'm throwing the big one, or if I can get away with them coming up, I'm going to throw a magic swimmer in there.
Okay.
Because now I've got a hard bait. I don't have to worry about changing soft plastics.
Okay. What about guys that like throwing worms? Shaky heads. Are they good in the fall?
Worms going to catch them no matter what year round. I don't like to throw it as much because I don't like to slow down. If I get on them and I know I'm on them, yeah, I'll slow down, pick them off.
Just not
But
your favorite way of fishing.
Just not my favorite way of fishing. I mean, but you're going to catch them on a worm regardless. I don't care what time of year it is.
Too many times have I needed number 5 in the fall, and I've never really once thought, I mean, just pick up damn old shaky head or the wacky worm and see if. I just like keep covering water because I just know know in my mind that in the fall that if I just keep covering water, I'm gonna run into.
But you don't, and that's the thing. I'm covering water. If you're in an area and you're like, I can get up number 5 with a shaky head, you're gonna stay in that area. Well, are the fish there or are they not? The way me and him fish, you cover water, you don't know what you're gonna land on. Heck, around the next corner could be an 8-9 pounder up there shallow.
If I kayak fished and I went into a creek and there was a little small arm that goes back in there 50 yards, but there's a dock on a point and you look and it's like that's a point at the mouth of that little small dock, and I was in a kayak, by God, I'm throwing something around that dock. There's fish around that thing on that point that's underneath that dock.
Yeah. And that's when you might bring out a worm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What's the biggest mistake anglers make when fishing in the fall?
Ooh.
You get stuck in the summer pattern.
Yeah.
Which is?
Offshore.
Getting stuck offshore.
Getting stuck offshore, throwing your big topwaters, your big worms, stuff like that. Once they start coming in, once that bait fish, this year's hatch gets up to a certain size and they start roaming out of the backwaters, everybody seems to forget about that and they continually throw the big stuff.
Okay, so not downsizing.
Not downsizing.
Not matching the hatch.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you? What's your answer now?
Biggest mistake I know that I've seen people make in the fall is they fish too deep.
Okay, not going shallow.
They don't go shallow. Well, there's a difference in shallow and shallow enough.
Okay.
You know, get away from a herring lake for a moment. We'll talk about a grass lake. The grass up there close to the bank may be productive, it may not. But if there's grass over here that's isolated, that's off in 10 foot of water or 12 foot of water, there's a much better chance that them fish over there are going to eat something.
Okay.
And that's going to be a little bit better of a congregation thing. You know, I try to equate fall fishing to church.
Yeah.
You know, where does everybody congregate? Well, we congregate at a church. You know, when you go to church on Sunday, if you do that. And it's kind of the same thing where, you know, I'm looking for places where fish can congregate. And the majority of the places that fish congregate is in less than 15 foot of water.
In the fall.
in the fall. You know,
In
that
the fall.
15. You know, and Lanier has. Back to Lanier. Lanier has areas where they'll congregate in 20, 25 foot of water.
Mm-hmm. But you're still looking for that place.
But you don't. I don't really focus too terribly much on getting off into ditches and stuff and start fishing in 25 to 40 foot of water in the ditches until
late November.
I look down on the graph when I put the boat in and it says 49 degrees, 50 degrees. If it says that, I'm gone. I'm like, well, we pretty much primarily we're going to fish the middle of these creeks and these ditches pretty much all day long.
Yeah, I'll fish. That's when I fish like channel swings and stuff like where the fish can move up and down quickly.
The biggest tip that I can tell you if you don't have much success in the fall, wherever you find fish in the fall, when the winter comes around, don't leave that area.
No, the
fish will stay there. My general rule of thumb that I give to people who ask me about fall, where do I find fish in the fall into the winter, wherever you find the bait in the fall, the bait, once they make a commitment, it's like getting married. They some of them divorce, but majority of them kind of stay married. Well, whatever creek they go in, they stay in that creek. They may not be all the way back there in 5 foot of water, but they may come out here to 40 foot of water.
But they're
in
in
the
that
winter.
creek.
But once they commit to a creek, they pretty much stay in that creek.
Is that the same on Allatoona?
Yeah, I see the thread fin and more of your shad styles doing more of that, staying where they go. The herring, I'll go in one creek one day, and they're just loaded in there.
The herring will be there, and they'll be gone the next.
And then you go back the next day, and they're gone. Herring continually move, but your thread fins, your spot tails, stuff like that, once they get in the creek in the wintertime, they're there.
Okay. All right. So, again, your favorite bait for the fall is a buzz bait?
It's a cross between a buzz bait and a spinner bait.
Buzz bait, spinner bait, and yours is a buzz bait?
Buzz
and
bait
a square
and a
bill.
square bill. Well, what I like to do with a square bill, I like to I call it worming through laydowns, or worming a square bill through trees. I'll throw it. You've seen it.
I saw that up on
You've
Notley.
seen me do it. Throw it in the middle of a laydown, in the heart of it, the nastiest stuff, and roll that thing through there. Because I want them to see something they don't always see. Okay, they don't see that bait coming through a tree that much.
Okay, so getting that reaction bite again.
Mm-hmm.
One bait in the fall you'll never pick up, or it would be the last thing that you would go to. That's a question for both of you.
The last thing I'm probably going to, me personally, the last thing that I'm going to dig for is like a green pumpkin creature bait.
Okay.
Like a lizard or a brush hog or something. That's probably one of the last things. You catch fish on it, I'm sure, but that's like an afterthought to me. I'm not going to go pick up a baby brush hog or something and Texas rig it and try to throw it, you know.
Mine's probably going to be something ultra finesse, like a Ned rig or a drop shot. You won't see me picking one of them up unless I have to.
Unless you have to.
Because I know those fish are feeding. I can get a reaction strike. And at tournament situation, you're looking for 5. You're looking for their 5 biggest bites. And I know power fishing, I can get my 5 biggest bites in the fall.
Okay.
Probably the most underrated bait in the fall to me is a Damiki.
Oh,
you don't really hear a lot of people. You hear a lot of people Damiki fish in the winter, but a Damiki in the fall.
In the fall, we gave up some juice
probably
there, Farmer. Well, listen, you can say
underrated.
throw a Damiki, but he's not saying how to throw it. And you don't have to. I understand.
Most people only
It is associated with ditch fishing.
Oh, it is. It's big time associated with ditch fishing. But most people see a Damiki as you can throw it one of 2 ways. You can throw a Damiki 9 to 10 different ways.
Yeah.
And if you figure out which way they're wanting it, then you can run. That's how I've had those days out there where I've caught 70, 80, 90 fish.
There's one way of throwing the Damiki that we will not utter on this show.
No.
And it is probably the most, when you do it, if you ever figure it out, you're going to be like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So you guys just got to go out and experiment and figure that way out on your own.
I ain't giving.
We
that
give away a lot of information on this podcast and stuff, but
That's one.
Not giving that. Not giving
can't
that.
give everything away, and that's going to be one thing we're going to hold in our pocket for a while.
I got you. All right. Anything else on fall fishing from either one of you guys before we end this podcast? Just some tips or pointers or what not to do, or have we pretty much covered most of it?
In the fall, don't be afraid to just get on the trolling motor and look around, because, like he said, most of them wolf pack and are cruising the bank. If you can find, they're easy to spot, because there's groups of 5 to 15 of them just cruising down the bank looking. So if you just get on your trolling motor and you just pay attention to kind of where the fish are at, I can go to the next creek over and start looking in that kind of general area of the creek, and 9 times out of 10 you'll find another group of them in the same.
Finding that pattern of what the fish are doing. What about you, Ryan?
Cheek and tongue. Just try not to slow down.
Try not to slow down.
Not to slow down.
But
Try not to slow down.
You've got 2 power guys here, so
That's okay though. It's a different point of view.
Yeah, it's point of view. I know people who do really well fishing really slow, but if you struggle with fall fishing, and I know people who've actually legitimately struggle in the fall.
I struggle every fall,
and
every day's different in the fall.
Yeah.
My biggest counteract to that, though, is if you struggle, is
Move.
Don't be afraid to change your game. If you can't change or adapt on the fly, the fall will eat you alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the constant between both of you guys is stay moving. Stay moving. All right, guys. Well, listen, hey, there's just some good tips for fall fishing coming up here in Georgia, and I imagine that will transition into other states, Alabama, Tennessee. It's probably the same, especially if you got the herring. I know a lot. We're blessed with herring on our lakes. Some people see it as a blessing, some people don't. But there's some pretty good tips right there. In the comment section, hey, let us know what you guys like to do in the fall and how you're preparing for it. So it's still hot again. It's August 1st. We wanted to kind of get a jump on the fall transition just to get you guys thinking in your minds about what's coming up, because right now it's kind of hot, stagnant, but it'll be here before you know it. A month and a half, it's probably going to be cooled off around here. So
we'll start cooling off.
Yeah, fishing's going to change.
Days are changing already. We're starting to lose daylight already.
Yeah, and it's deer season too, so it's getting ready to come up. There you go. But Jonathan, I appreciate you jumping in on this. Ryan, of course, thank you as always. And again, guys, look, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, click that notification bell, and hey, share this around. And again, leave us some comments. We want your feedback on all this. So you guys have a great day. Appreciate you listening, and go catch some fish. We'll see you.